Welcome back to Conservative Conversations. I'm your host, Reid.
And I'm Frank.
Today we have a special guest with us.
I'm Dustin.
And we'll be talking to him. And we will also be talking about Tucker Carlson's interview with Vladimir Putin and Joe Biden's disastrous press conference. So let's get into it. Before we get started, listeners, I want to remind you to please subscribe and follow us on your favorite podcast platforms and on YouTube. We would greatly appreciate it. And today we have a special episode. We'll be talking to a friend of ours, Dustin, who will be giving us his perspective on some of the current national affairs, if you will, from more of a average person's view or somebody who's not as politically engaged as we are or as our listeners may be. But first, we will start with a couple news topics that have been going around since we last recorded. And I think we'll start with Frank. He's going to talk about Tucker Carlson's interview with Vladimir Putin, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely the thing I've heard the most about. A lot of people are reacting to it. I had some friends text me, asking if I had watched the interview, if I was going to watch the interview. And I did watch it. It was very long. I was shocked when I first looked it up and saw that it was like almost 2.5 hours long. Right. I'm like, this is the interview that everybody's talking about? I just can't imagine that everybody sat around and watched the full 2.5 hour interview.
I didn't.
I doubt that that's very likely. But I did sit through it. And I ended up talking to my friend afterwards, sort of having like a reactionary discussion. And the thing that didn't really impress me is I've looked up Vladimir Putin before. And, he's done interviews with the American media plenty. Like, it's not like something that just happened. He's talked to the American media plenty of times before. Right. He's been on the national stage for a long time, basically his whole life, in a manner of speaking. So I listened to that thing and I thought it was kind of a snore fest. I'm not kidding. I really did. And I think there were some things like, Tucker brought sort of a fresh perspective in a way, he didn't sit there and ask the same old questions that the American media usually does. But beyond that, I thought it was very blasé, and Putin used his time to say a lot of the same things that he has said before. Right. So I didn't think he had come very far. There was nothing very novel about the interview. I think it's more of an issue of like timing and like what's going on in the world right now for this American reporter who's sort of like the black sheep of the American media to go over and sit with Putin at a time like this and get his perspective. But otherwise I don't really understand what the hype is in a
yeah way. I don't really either. Like I said a moment ago, I didn't watch the whole thing. I think might have made it an hour long, if that. But I don't quite get what the big hype was either. Everybody seemed so, I guess, hyped up about it before it was even going on.
Right.
Like you said, friends had texted you to see if you had watched it. Somebody asked me if I had watched it or was going to watch it. And I didn't really plan to. My plan was just to watch, clips and highlights of it.
Because they're all trying to get us to get the views. It's all the marketing and all the hype going into it.
Right.
When like somebody leaked it, like he's supposed to interview with Putin. Is that true?
It's a fake leak. They're always fake leaks.
Right.
So,
but I don't really see what the huge deal was about it. Like I don't feel like too much came from it. Like what did we really learn from that interview?
Right.
I don't really feel like anything.
Well, and what I thought was cool was, I guess just very shortly afterwards, Tucker was at the World Government Summit. And he did an interview about the interview with Putin. And I didn't catch the guy's name. He's some like Arabic guy or something, some Middle Eastern guy who was interviewing Tucker Carlson. But I thought that it's a 26-minute interview, and I thought that it was so much more profound than the 2-hour interview with Putin.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because Tucker Carlson sits there and says, sort of like defends himself, and sort of the moderator or, whoever that gentleman was, the Middle Eastern guy who was sitting there with him, they both sort of helped to defend Tucker Carlson, because some people have been upset that he went over there and did this interview in the first place.
Yeah.
Well, they both sort of like defended Tucker Carlson's actions, and he does talk more about like what I was just saying about it being the time, to go and sit and try and get this man's opinion, try to see how his mind functions, and sort of put him on record.
Right, which I think is a good thing to do. Because as it relates to, like, since the war in Ukraine, I don't know too many huge media members who've tried to sit down and talk to Vladimir Putin to get his side of what the situation is.
Well, I think they like to pretend, not react, but... And, we've talked about this before, but America, at one point not so long ago, had a sort of fascination with Russia. Mm-hmm. But then when the Trump thing came around, and they had that Trump-Russia collusion, all of a sudden Russia was this place that we didn't talk about anymore.
Right.
And they're the bad guys, the boogie guys. And we were never friends with them. We never went over there and gave them loving...
The reset button.
Right. We never tried... Exactly my point. I mean, they had done all of those things. When Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State, like you were just alluding to, they went over, they tried to reset negotiations with Russia. Under Obama, there was a lot of that. He did a lot on the world stage, Obama did. And the idea that America-Russia relations just soured overnight or just got good overnight or don't have a long established history is kind of funny to me.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. But the last bit of it came out, the last thing that I saw anyway, was Tucker was in a Russian grocery store.
Yeah.
And he said he just bought like a week's worth of grocery items or whatever. And he was trying to do like a comparison to like what the prices are over there to like what they are here. To do sort of like a piece on inflation or a comment on, how...
Right.
And sort of his comment, I believe, was that like they're more rural and they're not as politically involved and stuff like that. So they're not as, I guess they're a little more immune to the political, ramifications that come from,
because they don't get to pick their president.
I guess so.
Right?
I don't know, but
like they don't have a choice and they just feel controlled. Just
maybe.
Saying.
Yeah, I saw some of those clips of him going to the grocery store and going to the train station, talking about how nice they were, which is all right. I mean, I don't know too many big cities in a dictatorship country that aren't going to look nice,
right?
Because
they want it to look nice.
Yeah, they want it to look nice.
Yeah. There's nothing going on here.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Well, I also think it's interesting. I think, we'd be doing a disservice not to mention that one of the things people were upset with Tucker about was not bringing up, some of the issues at home in Russia. Like, for instance, the political silencing of opponents and things of that nature, like Navalny or whatever his name is. And he has subsequently died since he got to sit down with Putin and do that interview. So I just think that's interesting. It's just topical, I thought I'd just throw that out there.
Right.
But, that's interesting. I mean, Tucker did a good job of defending himself, I think. But, of course, hindsight's 20/20. And I'm sure Tucker is, in a way, kicking himself that he didn't ask about Navalny.
Right. Yeah, I'd hope so, because that's pretty kind of at least it seems to be a big issue.
But I also think it's interesting because when he was doing that World Government Summit, there were some of these questions, and people were asking, how come you didn't follow up on these things that people have asked Putin before? And he said, I thought it was kind of funny. I mean, Tucker Carlson, but he said, because they've been asked before.
Right.
So that was his whole thing. Like, he was trying to just let Putin talk.
Right. Yeah, I get that.
And not really control where the conversation went.
Right.
But
he probably might not have been able to get that interview with certain questions being asked. I'm
Sure.
sure
Right.
there's things that are off the table. You want to travel to my country and ask me questions about my life.
Very true.
Do you
Right,
want to go back to your country?
Very true.
We're talking about interviewing the former lieutenant of the KGB.
Right.
So, I mean, I'm sure, like kind of what Dustin was hinting at, there are some questions that might just be a waste of time to even bother asking. And some questions I'm sure he probably knew he shouldn't ask.
But I do think it's interesting because I'm sure he could have asked. They've been
Sure.
asked before.
Right.
And so I just think it's interesting. When you sit down and you think, well, what am I going to ask this great man?
Right.
Should I ask him the Navalny thing that's been asked 100 times? No, I'll just leave that alone. And then the guy dies a couple days later.
Right.
Well, for good, how could you have known? But
Right.
it probably would have been interesting to be the last guy
To
putting
ask about
Putin on record about that subject.
Right. Yeah, I thought it was definitely interesting that he went over there and interviewed him. I didn't really have a problem with it like some people seem to have. How could he go talk to Putin? He's a puppet for Putin.
I don't either, but I have a little bit better understanding of post-World War II relations with Russia than other people do.
Yeah. So I didn't mind. I thought it was, he's a journalist, so he's doing his job.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think it's great for him.
Yeah. I mean, it's a different thing to...
When everybody watched that interview.
Yeah, I've heard it's got, like, huge number of
Well,
viewers.
I mean, I shouldn't say everybody watched it because, I started this by saying I doubt it. Everybody sat and watched the 2 hour.
Right.
But everybody was curious about it. I'm sure everybody's seen clips. Everybody's talked about it in some manner.
Right. Well, one thing that I can't remember if this happened before Tucker's interview came out or just after, but Putin had said that he would rather deal with Joe Biden than Donald Trump.
Right.
Did you hear about that one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it was after, but
Right.
I at least saw it after anyway.
Right.
But
And that, I think, a lot of people, especially on the conservative side, would say that suggests who Putin actually likes and who's more, favorable.
I think it just shows
True.
who the weaker candidate is.
Well, yeah,
'Cause that's who
yeah,
he
that
would
too.
choose, the weaker candidate.
Exactly, yeah. Right? And that kind of leads me to the next topic. I believe since we last recorded, the, I forget the guy's name, the
Special counsel.
Yeah, the special counsel guy who was investigating Joe Biden's mishandling of classified information. He had reached his conclusion, and he decided there aren't going to be any charges because, I don't have the exact phrasing, so I'm just going to have to put it in my own way, because he found or decided that a jury would just probably find him not guilty because he's old and gentle and forgetful or stuff like that.
He's an old, well-meaning man with memory issues.
Yeah, that's closer to what was actually said. And then that prompted President Biden to come out and give a press conference to defend himself against being old and having memory issues. And it was a lot of people calling it one of the worst press conferences somebody could have given. Because it didn't go well.
That says a lot for Joe Biden.
Yeah, he did not make his case very well. He had trouble even giving his own speech, or that he tried to come out and give. And when he was done, he walks away just to come back for more.
Yep.
And it made it worse, because I think it was when he returned to the podium,
Yep.
after already leaving, is when he got the president of Egypt and Mexico confused.
Yep.
So I definitely don't think it looks good. I've talked to some people who have seen some of those clips, and definitely think he looks terrible. And he's old, and he's losing it. We've been talking about it for years. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I know.
And people are talking about, oh, is he going to take a mental exam or whatever, cognitive test, and trying to push him on doing that. But we don't need to. The only test you need to do is play back the tapes over the past 3 years. You can see it. Everybody can see it for themselves, his decline.
Yep.
So
I think it's crazy in that clip, that same part that you're talking about. He had just basically gotten into it with a lady in the press. Mm-hmm. She was asking. She said, you have answered this question previously when it's been asked by saying, "Watch me."
Oh yeah.
She said, but the American people have been watching, and they're, concerned. They have concerns about your health and performance. Mm-hmm. And he says, that's your judgment, but that's not what the media thinks. And she is the media.
I know.
She's standing there asking the question.
That was my thought, too. I mean, she is the press.
That's not what the media thinks. What do you mean, sir? I mean,
right?
Yeah, they all softball you, but they're even starting to have some issues with old Joe Biden. Starting to give him some pushback.
Because they're asking Kamala Harris if she's ready to take over. And, of course, she says, yes, I'm ready.
That's one of the real issues, though, isn't it? I mean, who would they put up? Mm-hmm. The only name I can come up with is Gavin Newsom.
Right.
And otherwise, who's their guy? Who's their candidate that's going to win?
Could have been Pete.
I don't know.
Buttigieg?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Look at his face. He's so He's done such a poor job. Charismatic. Right. Yeah, it's about how you can put...
He's done a terrible job as the transportation secretary.
Yeah, look at all the
He does not need a promotion.
Right. Yeah, in my opinion and in many other people's opinion, that press conference was... If it wasn't the nail in the coffin for his campaign, it's one nail, and there's probably going to be some more. Because it's not looking good for
Well, and can I just bring up the fact, because I am who I am.
Sure.
Give you the Popeye routine there. This ruling from the special counsel is crapola.
Yeah.
Do you remember is there something it reminds you of maybe in history that's happened before?
James Comey?
The James Comey thing with the email leaks from what's-her-face, Clinton. The same thing. He says, yes, evidence of wrongdoing was found. It was found she was keeping things on a private server. She had potentially leaked so many thousands of emails, but we find that no jury in their right mind would convict.
Right.
What was the same thing here? He's found to have willingly and knowingly had possession of these documents in unsecured locations. He falsely testified on X number of, dates about blah, blah, blah. But a jury would think that he was just a helpless old man. So we're not going to...
And Joe Biden wants to have it both ways. He wants to be able to say, no, I'm not, old and have memory problems. But that's the crux of him getting off on the charges.
Well, and here's one of the other things.
I never thought of that once. That's funny.
Right? But here's one of the other things, too, is what would a jury really be asked? A jury would ask to consider what state of mind Biden was in at the time that these crimes were committed.
Right.
Not now. Not some senile old man who's running the country, but back then when he took the documents, when he stored them in these locations, when he did these things.
Right.
And for me, that would be a no-brainer. We're talking, what? How many years ago? 20 years ago or whatever, 15 years, whatever the time frame was.
Yeah, some of them,
he's a younger guy.
Goes back to his days in the Senate.
Yeah, exactly. He had more of his faculties. That'd be easy to convict.
Mm-hmm.
How would that be difficult?
Right.
You're not dealing with the same Joe Biden.
Right. Yep. Well, I'll make this last point before we try to move on. In regards to Trump's case about his classified documents, at this point, the only thing his defense should be is they didn't do it for these other two people. So, what good reason, what good reason would they be able to convict him for it?
Well,
insurrection.
The only thing I'm hearing is that he tried to put up a fight and not giving them over when they asked.
Yeah, that's what they say.
Right.
But you have to remember, the other thing was the raid on his home had never happened before. That was a first in history. So, I mean, bridges have been crossed here.
Yep, it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. It's not looking good for Joe Biden, in my opinion.
No, I don't think so. Yep. But I also think, just to hit it one more time, I think it doesn't look good for the Democrats. Because who do they have?
Right.
It's going to be Kamala, you tell me?
Right. I thought I had a question I was about to ask you.
Well, I know. I would just ask, what are your political leanings? Like, it seems to me like you lean more to the left, like more liberal, more Democrat.
Let's see. I mean, you're free to, like, ask questions of topics that would, like, set the two apart if we're gonna play like a two-sided system sort of thing. But, like, I think that if you want to kill a baby, you can have an abortion, right? I think there needs to be stipulations in there, like how old, like weeks, how old is it? But I'm also not a woman. I'm not a person that has to go through any of that stuff. So I also, like, say that's not necessarily my opinion to have to worry about and push out there on people. But if I had to pick, let somebody do what they want to do with their body. Let them smoke crack if they want to smoke crack. Let them eat peanut butter and jellies and Cheez-Its and Big Macs all day. Let them do it.
Okay, so that all sounds kind of libertarian.
Yeah.
So where do you draw lines then? Like,
let's play a game. Let's do it. Tell me one and let's figure out the line, and I'll tell you where I would stand on it.
Well, I mean, I would have never picked abortion unless it came out of a hat and I had blindly picked it.
Yeah.
But since you led with abortion, I mean, it sounds like you spoke of, like, that there should be some kind of limits.
Yeah.
So what would guide that for you? Like, what's reasonable? What do you see as reasonable? Why do you feel that there should be, like, what in you makes you think that there should be some kind of, like, limit set on?
Yeah, because, like, it's 9 months. Babies can live at, like, 22 weeks with medical, like, attention. Like, they say like the heartbeat bill is like the 6 weeks or 8 weeks, but, like, that is just the beat of the heart. That is not a 4-chamber heart that can come out and live and survive out on its own. So I think, like, 6 weeks sort of thing, that whole stuff is too early to say the call. There's people who give birth who don't even know, like, they're pregnant, right? Because they never got, I don't know.
Right.
That always sounds like a lie to me.
Well, I mean, I've heard of that MTV show.
Yeah. So, like, 7 months, a 7-month-old baby in the womb, I mean, that's a hard decision to make for the person that's in there. They're kicking in stuff in the belly. That's like a human that's, like, moving around. So, like, that seems like too late of a time. But I don't know. Then there's, like, people that do get, like, raped. And then there's people who are in poverty and don't have, like, the best nutrients, right? So they might not have, like, an adequate diet that can support a baby. They don't have the government funding maybe to get the accurate things to make a healthy life. I think when those sort of situations come up, it shouldn't be necessarily the government's job to say that. Maybe the government doesn't have to fund it, like, if they're not going to have a say in it, then maybe it doesn't have to be necessarily their problem. I don't know. I don't think that far into it. But if I have to give a number, let's say 38 weeks.
38?
Yeah.
There's only 40 weeks.
It's my shit. It's my lucky number.
That's like almost time. That's 38 weeks.
26. We just got to put a number on it. But I think money plays an issue into it. I think, like, is this kid going to live, like, a good life? Like, yeah, people can adopt. There is that play.
Oh, okay. So barring, like, rape and incest exceptions, which you mentioned,
Yeah.
do you think personal responsibility ever plays a role?
Yeah. You mean, like, wearing a
Like,
condom?
Yeah, like,
And, like,
I don't know, even
practicing.
if you want to get down to the level of teenagers in high school,
Yeah.
I don't know anybody who's a teenager in high school and older who doesn't know what happens or what can happen when you're having unprotected sex. So if you're the type of person that engages in that type of behavior, at what point do we hold those people responsible for making the choice to
Engage in that activity.
where they can end up pregnant and then they just say, okay, well, I didn't want that to happen. Let me just get rid of this little human that's growing inside of me.
Well, I mean, it's a hard question because, like, you say you don't know anyone in high school that doesn't know the birds.
Well,
in the beat. There
okay,
are-
maybe late high school.
Yeah, but
like 17.
Sure, you would assume that people would know, but
Especially
it's our,
nowadays, what all the stuff they're teaching kids.
it's like
in-
our
in
first
class.
time being humans as well, and like we're 18 years into the system. It is a long time, but also it's like a blip in a 80-year span, and this is like right when our hormones and stuff were all starting to go crazy. Like, I didn't sleep around when I was in high school, but I had plenty of friends that all did, and I was like envious of that game. I just didn't have what it takes back then at a Catholic school. But I was too afraid of God in that sense. And that's
I always heard the Catholics were the freakiest, man.
Yeah, but like there's a big divide because you got that Catholic guilt and
Right.
and you think that he's watching over you all the time while you're like masturbating and stuff. And then you got to tell a priest. But anyway, back to what you're saying is just like some people, you would think people know. I was too afraid. There's some people that are like not afraid to just try it out. So, do they be held responsible for their... I don't know. I still say no. I say, like, that's not the point. Like, being held responsible. Because people get scot-free for doing worse things all the time.
Well, of course, and we would hope they would be held responsible too.
I think that there's a lot of lives out there, and there can be an infinite... I don't think we're running out of a shortage of people. If we were all... I don't know. It just seems like... That's not the route I would go, is thinking they have to be held responsible for their actions. If they have to be held responsible for their actions...
I mean, I guess putting it that way kind of makes it seem punishing, but I wouldn't really look
It's
at
like
it that way.
Trauma. Well, that's just how I internalized it, I suppose, when you brought it up.
No, that's okay. I mean, hearing you say it back the same way I phrased it is maybe what made me think of that.
Mm-hmm.
Basically hear my own words being said back to me. I guess my main thing would be like, at a certain point, if people understand what happens, engaging in this type of behavior, is the actual solution to just let people keep aborting their babies if they want to?
Well, I think there's going to that once again, we're talking about lines, right? So there'd have to be a line on that because you can't have too many abortions. That's going to mess up your system. People
Well,
don't
sure.
just have like 6 or 7 abortions, but they
Right.
might have, I don't know, 3, 1.
Still
One.
kind
I mean,
of a
I'm
lot.
sure it's very traumatic. I think it's a very traumatic experience. So it's easier to like talk about, but
Sure,
to be
of course.
like, I don't know, I've never gotten a girl pregnant, but like, I know a guy who has. I know a few guys who have, and they kept their babies. They didn't have abortions, and they.
Well, that's another
they have
interesting
beautiful little
topic that
babies.
doesn't get brought up too much. What about the men say it's half of their baby also?
Well,
So
if
I
they're
feel
also
like
on-
that's something that still has to be worked out, because I don't think we've fully worked that out in our society.
And what if the woman wants to keep it, and then the guy doesn't?
Right.
That's the opposite side of that story.
Right. Well, that's usually the case.
And if you're usually underage, like, is it if we're talking about not usually, if we're talking about underage scenarios, like,
Right.
is it the parents' position too? Do they have weight in the situation? You would think they would. So then, like, if all
Right.
parents agree, like, we don't want this to, like, go through, and everyone's on board, then, like...
But it brings up some big questions. I mean, because
does.
now if you look at what they've done with medical procedures, like for the transgender people,
Mm-hmm.
Young people can go seek what they call affirming care or whatever. And the counselors, the teachers, the doctors, the nurses, they're not allowed to tell the parents in certain states.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I feel like we've practically already gone a bridge too far, because if they can do things like that, be on somebody's insurance, have all these crazy medical procedures that the parent would never agree with on their dime,
Mm-hmm.
and it literally be against the law for anybody to tell the minor's parent,
We're talking, like,
I think
puberty
we've just
blockers,
puberty blockers,
but not, like,
surgeries.
No real surgeries. Like, they don't cut private parts.
I wasn't all up to date and prepared to
I don't
talk
really...
about that, but I just am saying, like, I feel like we've gone so far, and the abortion question has helped bleed into that, I think.
Mm-hmm.
By allowing all of this care, by sort of bending too far that way, by saying, we want to make it accessible to people, we want it to be allowable, we want Planned Parenthood to be near problem areas, and we want people to turn to this care and use it.
Right.
And I don't know, I just think now we're at a place where parents, we're on a borderline where parents are losing their rights over their children.
Right.
Altogether. So
Yep, that is interesting. But we've certainly come far from the old days where they used to say safe, legal, and rare regarding abortion. And I feel like, in general, more people would be willing to agree on those sorts of terms, because that's, it seems more reasonable. Obviously, there are people that think, safe, legal, and rare is still too far. And of course, there probably would be people that would think that's not far enough. But those days are gone, because that used to be kind of the thing back in, like, the 90s and early 2000s, I think.
They would use that slogan.
Yeah, when,
that was the slogan when Roe became
Right.
a national standard.
We'll move on to another kind of topic to get your perspective on. The administration has been trying to pump up Bidenomics, talking about how good the economy has been going. How do you or other people feel the economy is? Like, do you think it's getting better, or do you think it's still been just as bad? Or maybe yours, people, some of the few people who think the economy's still been going great.
So I'd say that I don't talk to people necessarily about the current state of the economy,
Okay,
right?
sure.
But I do have to get gas,
Right, yeah.
and I do have to buy eggs and milk. So, like, food is more expensive now.
Right.
So there is that. Gas still seems relatively the same, even if it was higher before and then dropped. This 330 is 330 to in Ohio, let's just say,
Right, yeah.
in Columbus. 330 for gas is to $3 is like what I've been used to. I feel like for the past 6 years, 7 years. It was cheap, like right when COVID was out, right when COVID was starting. It was like $1.81 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like it's just been relatively high. I think cost of living's high. I think changing all 4 tires is expensive.
Right.
I think $40,000 a year now is not the same as $40,000 a year was when we're in the 70s. And I think that the minimum wage in the 70s doesn't adequately, it's not proportionate to what it should be now, based on the fact that 40,000 then isn't the same as 40,000 now.
Right.
So I would say it's probably not good, but the stock market's great. My 401k is looking good. I'm finally at this point in time, after the crypto crash, I've now gotten back to like a baseline. So like there's a baseline metric in there somewhere.
Well, that's interesting. I feel like, like you're talking about with the prices of, goods and services is what most people really notice about the economy. And
I got more. I'm sorry, because I do work at a t-shirt place, right? So like we have to import clothing and stuff all the time.
Has that gone up?
It's not necessarily that it's gone up, but like it's the duration for shipments arriving has been delayed.
Oh, like supply chain related.
Supply chain.
Okay, yep.
What
do you know where it comes from?
Not necessarily. I'm not in charge of all the ordering, but it would just like a lot of times. So we don't have any like cotton mills in America. So all that stuff has to get made overseas. So in order for us to get something shipped from Florida from a manufacturer, they have to get it overseas at one point, or they ship it over there and it gets created and shipped back.
I gotcha.
So like sometimes like some types of clothing are just out for months, and when people ask for it, we just say we don't know when they're necessarily coming back.
Right. It's interesting that you mention that, because I haven't really heard too much talk about supply chain issues. I mean, I know in some sectors they still exist, but they've been going on for quite a while. So it's interesting that a more direct antidote. Did I say it right? I always have trouble with that. Anecdote. I guess kind of backs that up.
What is the current state of the economy? In this sense, that's what I've got to put down. But what did you guys got?
But I think I try to avoid saying always when I don't mean always, but people like to vote with their wallets, and that it goes back to Bill Clinton. It's the economy, stupid. I feel like has been true and is usually true, and probably will still be true for this election cycle.
Well, it certainly will. I mean, and people are still feeling it, I mean, and that's why you had Biden do his little commercial in the middle of the Super Bowl.
Oh, yeah, the shrinkflation.
Because you have to find a scapegoat. It's the companies. It's the evil companies that are causing inflation.
Right.
It doesn't have anything to do with government monetary policy.
Right.
No. It's the Doritos company.
Frito-Lay's is taking 5 chips out of your bag and charging you the same price.
I mean, that's just how silly it all is, though, is you have the man who supposedly is leading our country coming and blaming all the problems on Doritos and Pepsis and Oreo cookies. That's who's really screwing everything up in America. The companies are.
Right.
Well, they are at some point, because why are they the only companies on the shelves? I'm just saying, all we can get are Frito-Lay's chips, and it's like extremely hard for local chip companies to even be a thing. Like I'm an independent artist. I work 3 jobs. Like there's not that American dream of like owning like a business and like making a living on it is like harder and harder, to where if you want to do something like that, you got to work for Frito-Lay. You got to work for somebody else instead of being able to do it from yourself from the ground up. I think that's a statement on the economy then, if that's not like really a feasible option unless you have like family that has wealth that can be your private bank.
Innovation and entrepreneurship is part of the many pieces of the engine that drives the economy.
Well, and it's one of the backwards things that we've seen go on in America for some reason. All these companies keep buying each other out and just becoming one big conglomerate instead of having all these little companies. And so now I think a couple years ago when we were in college, when that movie Food Inc. came out, there were only like 4 or 8 companies that owned the entire meatpacking industry. And it's probably changed by now. It's probably down to 3 manufacturers. So, I mean, yeah, that's definitely a problem, but I don't know how to address that.
That's a huge implement. I mean, yeah, you're talking about like meat, right? So the one way to do that would be to like not have to rely on big companies like that anymore.
Right.
And that only starts
and
with
we're
us.
starting to see that because, I
vote
mean,
with your
I see
wallet.
ads
Right.
and hear ads all the time for these, special meat companies. Like, what is it? Good Ranchers, not a sponsor, but they're an example of stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So it's good to see that people are at least trying to, make other options besides these big companies.
Pretty much anyone is allowed to have chickens as well. And I know back in 2016, 2018, I had chickens, so I didn't have to buy eggs from the store. When eggs were like, eggs are like $5, $6, $7 now.
That's crazy.
Yeah, just, there's things we can grow our own gardens. We
Right.
can not rely on
Absolutely.
factory farming and the economy so much to tell us what we have to pay for.
Right. Well, Dustin, do you have any last comments? Any things that you've seen in the news? Maybe you want to pick our brains on, or any kind of...
I want to pick. I'll think of other things, but I have one thing I want to pick Reid's brain on, and that was the Ben Shapiro rap. Did you like it? What were your
Facts
thoughts?
of Tom McDonald.
Yeah.
I thought it was okay. I mean,
I thought it was hilarious.
Yeah, it's Ben Shapiro, so I don't know what you would expect from him doing a rap song.
But what do you think he thinks? Do you think he thinks that it's dope, or do you think he thinks this is cute and funny, and I'm helping my friend out, and I'm getting a lot of money for doing this?
I haven't seen it.
I'd say both. I think it's both. I feel like if I obviously don't know, but if I had to guess, Tom McDonald probably came to Ben Shapiro with the idea.
Oh yeah, or a collab, but yeah.
Right. But I think, in part it's kind of trollery, and also in part...
Trollery.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's trolling, I think, too.
And I don't know, I mean... I guess that's mostly... I think he probably sort of did it for fun. Like I said, if I had to guess, Tom McDonald probably asked him if he wanted to do something together. And, one of Ben's memes, I guess you can call it a meme, or one of the things that he's sort of internet famous for is him reading rap lyrics from other rappers, most famously or notably WAP.
True. I forgot about that, but yeah.
So, yeah, in a way, I think it's kind of a joke, but I also think it helps Tom McDonald. How many songs from Tom McDonald have you heard?
Like 3.
Yeah,
I
haven't listened.
I know his premise.
Right, yeah. So, I mean, and my other part of it would be that I just kind of think it helps with Ben's name recognition, maybe to get Tom McDonald more followers to hear his type of rap music. Because like they say in the song, Tom McDonald says in the pre-chorus, I'm going to have to kind of paraphrase it. Well, the main lines, I know he says, we won't turn your sons into thugs and your daughters into hoes. Which, is a lot of the theming and content of popular rap music that you hear on your radio is like, the gangster rap and always talk about money, always talk about women, always talk about cars, doing drugs, all this stuff. And Tom McDonald is trying to put out a different image of rap music.
So then let's do this then. So like at the end of this year, what's it gonna be? Like who's gonna be taking the throne? And is it gonna be old man versus old man running up? I mean, we got plenty of time. There's like 7-8 months until we vote.
Yeah, that's one thing I always say.
People could die.
Things can change between
people
now
can
and
go
then.
to jail. That's a thing.
Well, I
I doubt it, but it's a thing.
I think Donald Trump's probably going to win.
I think he's going to take the cake.
Yeah. Because
So you're
I've
saying
said
he's gonna
in
be able to
our...
run? Is he gonna be able to be voted for in every state?
Well, per the Supreme Court, yeah.
Is that
Yeah, we'll definitely find out soon on that case, the Colorado one.
Yeah.
But
I mean, I didn't mean to suggest that it's already been ruled on.
Right.
But I think it will be ruled that way. Yes.
Right.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. I've mentioned before on the show in the past couple episodes that, in my view, we're sort of going through a historical moment, kind of like a change in the society. And there's only been one other time history was made by a president serving 2 separate terms.
Non-consecutive.
Yeah, non-consecutive terms, Grover Cleveland. And I feel like history's going to be made again. Donald Trump's going to be the second president to serve non-consecutive terms.
He'll be the 45th and
the 47th
president.
And then is that going to unite us or separate us further?
Hopefully unite, but I think it'll take time. It won't just be overnight.
What are the main things we have to do to unite under something so polarizing?
Okay, so
good question.
Well, I know how I foresee that. I've talked about it before, but I think when Trump went into office and the economy really boomed, a lot of people said that those were holdover effects from the 8 years of Obama. Okay, well, maybe that was fair. I'm no economist. I'm not. I don't think it was fair, but anyway, Biden gets in there, and the economy's been not so great.
Mm-hmm.
I think if Trump gets back in there, and he can have some time, a year or something, I think you'll start to see everything start to boom again. And hopefully that's something that people can rally around. Like we're talking about. People see it at the grocery store. Anytime they whip out their wallet, buy gas.
Not because other people are getting screwed over by the man in other parts of the world, or
what do you mean?
Like for us just to get cheaper things on the shelves, cheaper gas, like that's a trickle down effect that affects the entire world at that point.
So what would Trump do that would?
I don't know. That's why I'm asking, like, whether either of these people are president, like, how are we ever really going to be, like, united in this sense?
I kind of feel like what Frank was getting at is, once there's a more positive outlook on the country,
and people can actually see that Trump, by his policies, that he's enacting as the leader,
right,
that are starkly different than Joe Biden's. And once the economy starts to sing again, hopefully people will realize, Trump's really not that bad. And the first time he did have a good effect on the economy. He's having a good effect on the economy now. Groceries are cheaper. Gas is cheaper. Hopefully people will be able to wake up from some of the negative hype that has been associated with Trump, and they'll be able to see some of the good that he has done.
There's Brett Baer from Fox News. He does a weekly podcast, and in the intro, it's like a montage of clips of people saying stuff. And one of the things that I believe it's another Fox News guy, the old guy, what's his name? I guess it doesn't really matter. But he says, and this is a clip from when Donald Trump was president the first time, he says something like, he often gets criticized for the stuff he says, but they ignore, I think that's what he says, they ignore what he has done as far as his policies go. And I think, hopefully that will be evident again. Maybe people will actually see that, yes, this man might not behave the best as far as his personality goes, but he's, running the country well enough that those petty things don't matter.
Fair. I just want a president that will admit he's wrong when they're wrong. When they make a mistake, they can apologize. I've yet to see
you're
that
talking about
in my
politicians
life.
here.
Yeah.
I
Right.
think,
but we're talking about us at the same time. Like, it's our lives that get affected by these people
sure,
controlling us. And even though we are the land of the free and home of the brave, don't get me wrong. America all the way. I'd rather be here than anywhere else.
sure. Well, yeah, I think a lot of people can agree with that. There are plenty of things that need to be fixed around here, but
I think, yeah, with all
but
the
nobody
problems.
wants to go anywhere else. But I think that was quite a good discussion, fellas. I enjoyed it. It was definitely a long one.
Was it? Thank you for having me.
But listeners, if you enjoyed this episode, please follow and give it a like on your favorite podcast platform. You can find us on Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, and many other popular platforms. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel. We upload the audio there, and you can give us a thumbs up and a like. And we thank Dustin for coming on and being an extra voice in our conversations. It's nice to have somebody else around other than just Frank and I here all the time.
Woot woot.
Yep. I think it's been a lot of fun today. And as always, we thank you guys for listening.